Hi, YouTube. Hi. Uh, the name of this video, as you might have guessed, if you know my YouTube channel lately, this video is called Deconstructing Professor Anton. And I've spent a lot of time, and I plan on opening up a playlist of all of my videos critiquing Anton. But this morning I got up at about 3 a.m. and I came out and I recorded a video, and only about 20 people saw it. And I realized partway through the recording of the video that, or along after I got quite far into it, that I was not able to make my final connections, and it's because I had missed a few important spots. And so I spent a great deal of today pondering what it is that I missed, and going over just a few of the more recent videos that Anton's posted, and some of the other ones, and wanted to show, wanted to talk about a few things. First of all, I'm going to make the claim that Anton is stuck on living in two dimensions, living in the present, right? It seems to be a modern movement. A lot of people go to group classes. They study Eckhart Tolle. They try to presence themselves in the moment, and this seems to be something of a deflation of the ego or the sense of I, and allowing one's interaction with other people to imbue more of a communal love and an expiation of guilt, of getting rid of the guilt. And so it seems as if it's kind of a common philosophy, and I think that Anton meets that. But there's this thing where Anton wants to live two-dimensionally in the present, take his knowledge of the past, draw from it. Um, Obviously, he's a professor, so he's mastered very much knowledge. But a lot of his conclusions appear to be about being awed, A-W-E, awed, by the moment, and being conscious within that moment and revering that moment, right? But that there's a retention of rationality in the moment, right? There's one thing to be awed, and then there's one thing to become absurd. There's one thing to be awed and retain rationality, and then there's one thing to be awed and lose rationality. And so Anton wants to retain a rationality, right? But he's a communications professor, and that means that he's he's got to move amongst disciplines and remain as a multi-disciplinary professor. But something was reminding me about a paper that I wrote in college. And the paper was in an evolution class that I took. And in the evolution class, I was writing a paper on a book, and I just barely found the book. It's by Stephen Jay Gould. It's called Hen's Teeth and Horse's Toes. I think that's the book. It's been a long time. And anyway, partway through the book, there was a chapter that was discussing an argument that came from somebody that presented themselves in the moment. And it went something something like this. Survival of the fittest is a misnomer. Instead, we should call it survival of those who survive. Because when looking at the past, you have those that did survive and those that didn't, right? And so Anton does the same thing, right? Anton does the same thing. We're going to listen to a few of his videos. And so I'm just giving you the outline of this, right? And so there's the idea that survival of the fittest becomes tautological, right, into survival of those that survive. Now, Anton wants to reduce nature into that which is tautological, right? And then he wants to be awed by the zero, right? Because somehow this is an avenue, right? An avenue which I believe is an avenue to perceiving time and space in a multi-dimensional fashion as opposed to a two-dimensional fashion. And so what do I mean by this, and why is that book important? The rebuttal of those that say, well, look, the ones that survived are the ones that survived, and the ones that didn't are the ones that didn't. So survival of those that survive. The fittest is based on what? Strictly on those that survived, right? Now, the rebuttal to that argument came after I wrote the paper on that. Sent it to the professors. He brought it to the faculty. They had a good laugh at it. And although they know that I wasn't the creator of it, that I was just simply talking about it in terms of it, the problem with saying something like that, they said, well, it's considered survival of the fittest because the organism is competing with other organisms for its survival in a changing environment, right? So there had to be a dynamic environment that was changing. Okay, so anyway, what had caught me was a few things about what Anton was saying. So let me see if I can kind of explain what it is I'm getting at, and we'll go from there. Let's start with his statement right here.
Unfortunately, that people cannot deny Darwinian evolution anymore. It's a fact. This is no longer something that people can suggest is a set of beliefs. No, this is a fact. Evolution is a fact. It's not the equivalent of something like religious dogma. What people are going to need.
Okay. So it's not equivalent to that which it's akin to religious dogma.
To learn to do is to make room for all of the scientific discoveries and not have any of that challenge their ground or
Okay. Okay. So he's first of all he's saying that survival of the fit, or that Darwinian evolution, which is natural selection, right, is a fact. Okay, so he states that there, and this is in Science and Religion, the Future in Review video, right, and then at about 9 minutes and 22 seconds, he says this about nature. So first of all, and I'll link, I guess, to my previous video where I'm discussing what I call his joculations, right? His joculations and his indexing of initially what would be considered three definitions of the word natural. But let's just listen to the natural part first.
the stochastic, the once occurrent. And music, art, literature are going to be among those. And zero, complicated mathematics. The more that people who try to dismiss mathematics as not being part of nature because they say, well, it's simply a human invention, or if they say, well, art isn't really part of nature, art is something that humans do.
Okay, so first of all, what's happening is that he's got there's a definition of nature, right? That religious people might have a bivalent relationship with. If you look up Venn diagrams and you look up bivalence, you would see that the individual and nature are pitted against each other, right? But that's not how he uses it. And I want to grant over initially 3 segments in my Venn diagram, which is the use of art, the use of nature, and the world, right? And separate those out. And the reason I want to do that is I want to start with the idea of nature in a Venn diagram, right? And now Anton likes to use the phrase up against and over, those types of things. And so what he does is he utilizes 3 different types of nature, where the first one is a view of nature, which he's critiquing right now, saying that art, which I'm stating here, is, in this Venn diagram, is surrounded now by nature and the world, to be the second definition of nature. So I have N1, N2, and N3. All of these are 3 different types of natures, where he's going to start by saying nature, and then he's going to slowly go upward and against and around that which is an artifice, right? And earlier in my other video I was saying, now, if my shoulder is physics and it's the orbit of the universe, and my humerus is organics, right? Organic plants and animals. And then let's say my radius is domesticated animals and dead languages. And let's say that my hand is equipment, synthesis of machines, and non-representational art, right? Then what we have is Anton wanting to take the vernacular use of nature, right? This first N diagram, which I'll say is a lowercase a for art, an uppercase N, right, and a lowercase for world, right? And he wants to say, no. It's not. This is just not. The organic world is not everything that nature is. Nature includes this entirety of the arm. It's outlined because it's like the skin, it's contiguous to the arm, right? So the people that are trying to say that the manipulation of man or the creation of machines or the non-representational view of the world, right, are not a part of nature, that they're wrong. And so he moves then to the second definition of nature, into which I say it's the converse implied, right? So up here we have the converse not implied, which is where you would just say there's nature, right? And then you include where nature and man, that's the second one, artifice, I'm calling the man-made, what man does. Because it's so interesting that Anton, through Heidegger, wants to really speak about an individual that deals with its own issues and its own absence, and really conflates the notion, even language, the creation of language. I'm calling the artifice, or part of the artifice here. So the natural world crosses mankind, man's language, man's, like maybe the fingers are language, right? It crosses in at the body in this one. In this one, Anton wants to say, no, nature and the world, the entirety of the world is and two here, right? And so we're outlining man now, and we have the converse implied. But then he goes on to say that artifice, humans, language, everything that we are, right? I give it a capital A, capital N for capital nature, capital W. It's all one thing now. So we have all one thing now, right? And when you have all one thing, you have more than just an apophantic or a pulling out and negating and showing the opposite and the falsifiability of an object. You have a tautology, right? And it's not dissimilar. This natural tautology is not dissimilar to the tautology that I explained at the beginning of this video. The survival of those who survive. So Anton, once again, now first he's going to say evolution is true, Darwinian evolution is true, natural selection is true, but then he's going to make the same fallacy and bring everything into a tautology with regards to nature. Let's listen.
Or even intention. They say, well, nature doesn't have any intention. People maybe have intentions, but nature doesn't. Oddly, these are the same people who are quick to point out the continuities between humanity and the rest of the world. Well, you can't have it both ways.
Okay, so the continuity, right, with humanity being here, right, and I'm always drawing this delineation right here, but the continuity goes this way. And so what I'm suggesting is this: yes, you can have it both ways. You can run this angle, right? This is a three-dimensional diamond that I've created, right? And it's to show space and time and history, right? And so if one runs around one particular orbit or one particular dimension of the diamond, and then one rises up, you know, then they're two-dimensional, right? Now, Anton does the same thing. Over here, he reduces nature into, and joculates. The reason I've outlined this line here, you might have to blow the screen up, between the lowercase a, which is artifice and language, right, and uppercase a, that's where he joculates. So he's getting it both ways, where he's able to speak about man and language and the importance and stave off the world, stave off the universe here, but then he collapses it into a tautology, right? So he's indexing and using that for his own benefit in that case. Now, let's see what else he has to say and why this is important. Same video, Science and Religion, at 1645.
I think some of intelligence comes from really seeing the full context of how limited human knowledge is, how vast the cosmos is.
Okay, now once again, I accuse Anton of being two-dimensional on my three-dimensional diamond here. And so he wants everybody to be in the present. Once again, in the present, he says, we are, or here is, we are the opening, or nothing becomes the opening from which all of this came, and this is where we're supposed to look inward. When I'm suggesting, well, the inwardedness, although we are present, the inwardedness has to do with an understanding of looking at time and dimensions, which is really ironic that he'll joculate then with age, and he'll make a video about age and not knowing quite whether or not you're older or younger and how this is relative to perception, and then he'll joculate about time in another moment, right? But let's continue here.
And then trying to, again, try to get at that in terms of what is all of it. And none of it needs, if I say what is all of it, I don't want an answer like, oh, look, see, it's proof for this created.
Okay, so already he's limiting the answer that he wants. If I say, what is all of it, and I'm pointing out time and dimension and I'm adding what might be considered a vernacular, trying to pull apart and unpack the Venn diagram to perhaps reconsider that the first definition of nature that is not including man or its language, and it's not including the cosmos, the shoulder, so to speak, that nature has a vernacular definition that we've inherited that is the offset of us. Now, granted, the history of man's relationship with nature has changed considerably, but to fully collapse it is to make the same tautological argument where he can't have it both ways. He can't both believe in natural selection and then make survival of the fittest and nature tautological with itself.
Or this is the source of it. No, it's to simply dwell in the mystery while recognizing one's own being here right now.
Okay, once again, it's about the now. Okay, so all openness, all dimensions for Anton in this mode, in this joculation, in this tautology, exists in the now, right? Because you can't, according to what he's saying, you can't imagine your past being otherwise. It is what it is, right? Anything else is an imagination. But that, once again, is collapsing into a two-dimensional tautological vantage point. But let's see.
See, I think I can say, could the universe have not been? And my answer is no, it is. Could I have not been? No, you are. See, could you have not been? No, you are. This is the meaning of the past. The meaning of the past is that the past as past couldn't be otherwise. Now, you can try to change it, but to pretend that the past could have been otherwise is really to pretend that it didn't happen. It's to pretend.
Okay, to pretend that the past could have been otherwise is to pretend that it didn't happen. Once again, the argument in natural selection, the survival of those who survive. It's looking at a static background. It's looking at the past as if it by itself is completely determined and determinable, right? And since we are present, we have to grant a singularity while looking at the past. But I suggest that by looking at the past, we're simply looking at one side of one of these pyramids right here, and that instead of seeing in this tautology that there is dimensionality that still suggests that this individual, this man, right, and this nature are separate, right? That the nature and where they cross over, that the nature takes a second seat, or that the nature dominates, but that upon looking at a dimension into the past, we are not to look at the past because it has reached the present as a singularity, right? Now, hopefully people can see why this is problematic, where in one moment everything is flat to Anton, and he uses a collapsing of nature in this moment, and then in the next moment he reopens it and he unpacks it at his convenience, such that it makes sense to him.
And that the people who were there weren't there, didn't do what they did. Responsibility, owning it with an ethical intensity, it really begins when one sort of wakes up and kind of comes to terms with what all this is. There's a big fireball in the sky, a bunch of animals are running around eating each other, and one of these organisms is somehow able to contemplate its own non-being.
Okay, so now he says we get to contemplate our own non-being, which is kind of funny because because the contemplation of non-being, once again, would be the converse implied Venn diagram, where the non-being of the man is set against some background, right? There's some background. Otherwise, we couldn't speak about the us because of the apophantic, because of the notion of the background. Now, how does he do this? How does Anton keep joculating? I say joculating between different frames, different considerations, different logical reframings. He joculates, and then he juggles what I think is a triptych of sorts. Now, how is he doing that? This is what I wrote earlier today. So I'll put a link to the past, and you can see how it is I'm trying to unpack things earlier. But let's move on to what he says about nothing in his "Nothing is Real" video. And when he says nothing is real, it's very important that we see that he's taking the predicate of no and the predicate of some, and he wants both of those predicates or suffixes to be attached to our considerations of what is real, right? And hence violating, let's say, a vernacular notion about what is present as opposed to what is absent.
There is nothingness. Now, I'm not denying that everything that is or all that is. I'm just trying to include the nothing into it. I think if you try to think about all that is, you have to include nothing in all that is. Now,
okay, and so what I see him doing in this case, right, is that if we're going to speak about all that is, right, I think that it is to say, right, as soon as, or maybe I should write it right here, that things are real, right? Now he says nothing is real, right? So if we guard this off and we put our parentheses around things, in this case, we can say that things are real, like materiality is real, right? And then we can say no things are real, or nothing is real, right? And partition that off in that respect. And now this brings up two different things. If we say things are real, then that is like introducing the number one, the presence of something, right? And then if we introduce no things, as if no is a negation of things, are real, then we can speak about let's say, -1, right? In this particular case, right? Now, he argues, what are you going to do? Let's see how his argument continues from here and how he continues this. It's a little move, and he's got a lot of criticism for this, but how he moves into the denial, talking about only what is and not what isn't, but wanting to include what is not in all things.
You say that all that is simply materiality. You miss the fact that nothing is part of human experience.
Okay, now nothing is a part of human experience. Now I attribute that to speaking about imagination, right? That we have an imagination that is nothing. Consciousness is not a thing, and yet we have it. Language is not exactly a thing, and yet we have it. The idea of zero, right? If we say we have a 1 in this case and a -1, that no things, the negation of things that are real, is another case, then what we have is we have the third case is the 0, right? And this is kind of like the negation of 1 and -1, right? It's the absenting of it, which is the placeholder for 0. And then he joculates. Would be a joculation between 0 and -1, where in one case, things are real, being the 1, is juxtaposed against the negation, which would then mean that he would speak about -1. But then here, coming up, he'll say, what does it mean to deny that? You have to use the not operator again to deny it, so that you have nothing is real, right? And that would be a denial of the -1 and the 1, which would be the 0. But now, in set theory, or if we talk about nothing is a void, right? Now, if we say the basket is empty, there's still air in the basket. If we take it to space and we say we're now in a void, well, there's light passing through that, so there's the notion of the ether, which then is arguably not there, and then there's the argument that there is energy there in a dynamic informational theory mode. There's arguments that suggest that there's still pockets of things appearing, but appearing in the nothing, right? So in one case, when Anton says nothing is real, he's also not just referring to imagination. It would be like referring to imaginary numbers and then voids, right? And that's a joculation between these two, where when we say nothing is a void, in set theory, if you look up Helmholtz's set theory, naive set theory, you'll see that there is parentheses indicate absence, right? And that this can be replaced with nothing is real. So if nothing is a void, I think means the empty set. And then when we say and joculate to nothing is real, that would be like an empty set with the line through it, the null set line through it. And that these two are replaceable. They're substitutable, right? So as we have a substitutability over here between nature, including all artifice, including language, including everything, that's juxtaposed against where we segment it off, where we delimit, where I make a delineation and say this is what's separate, right? And he does it here. Now the thing about all this, well, let me play a little more here.
It is humans dwell in a kind of nothingness, and the nothingness isn't just.
Now, when he says humans dwell in a kind of nothingness, he's almost speaking. I think, once again, it's a two-dimensional approach to say we're dwelling in a nothingness. It's as if we can't see a somethingness around us, right? It's almost a denial of presence and an acceptance of absence. And I think he says in a comment that Burke suggests that we live through the negative. Now, if you scroll down on his Nothing is Real video, right, his first comment is this: only those who would deny what actually is the case would deny that we humans know of never and nowhere. We find nothing every time something expected happens. If I ask, is it 32 degrees out? And if it is any degree other than 32, you can correctly answer, no, it is not 32 degrees, right? It's not the 32 degrees. It's not one, right? It's not -1. And then he says, but there is such a thing as not being 32. It is 50 or 53 or 41, implying that it's something else. So 0 defers to -1 when it's convenient. The empty set moves to the empty set when it's convenient, expressed in a different way, substitutable for the other one, where negation is present next to absence, and they're considered two different things. Now, it was interesting because Pirro said in programming they actually have a -0, and a -0 would be like an inverted parenthetical, where to say there's a -0 would be like implying a not zero. All answers are not 0, therefore they're either this way, the negative number line, or the positive number line, right? As long as it's not 0, which I found very interesting in terms of these three joculations. So we have the joculation here between artifice, that which is human, maintaining it as its separation, and then including it into its tautology. And this is juxtaposed with the void being an absence, and then the jocularity between 0 and -1. Now, why is this important when we deconstruct or unpack Anton's philosophy? Because we find that there is a triplet juggle going on in his philosophy, and I think this is what's irritating a lot of people, and why he himself, to himself, finds himself in a mystery, or he's caught, right? The poor man is caught in pontification, as far as I can tell, and he maintains seeing only the front of the top of a pyramid, and then he pierces, like a tautology being pierced. He'll knock it out in one dimension, and it's as if all one pyramid has only one receding line, like a prism, right? And that his universe is not a diamond, it's a prism. And it only ever falls back in one dimension, and that we're only always at the present, and so we can only ever puncture this hole that is this mystery, looking back at this undeniable universe. But like I said, if he cannot separate out the tautological function and yet demand the rigors of evolutionary biology with survival of the fittest, right? Then I believe his communication theory, as it intersects biological science, is an abuse and a misread of the biological science, because the biological science is suggesting that we make substitutable that which is imaginable with that which is real, in order to investigate a history of the present that is dynamic and moving in multiple dimensions that we can segment off and not collapse into a singular moment, a singular presence, right? It's this notion that we are, in fact, individuals changing, that we can always individually function as independents, and as the difference between communal language always being bound as one, and the notion that there's an otherliness to things. So anyway, I'm impassioned because of this. If we are always only ever in the present, right? Then, and we are to collapse everything into the present, and we are to sense our entire universe, the history, our empirical, ostensive, ontic environment, the fact that we can speak. If we are at that moment, the maintenances of inheritable conventions, such as reading left to right, such as deferring signs to signify, such as always maintaining a rationality. And if we don't maintain a rationality, then we maintain a poetics. There is no need to retain even a brace. There's no reason to retain an inner monologue belt of thought. There is no reason to not see coincidence and dimensional relationships, or being open to irrationality. There's no reason in a present moment, if all is one and flat and present in the moment. There is, if we're to speak of superlatives or superlatives, that would be the difference over here between talking about nature 1, nature 2, and nature 3. That nature 3 as the tautology, which Anton keeps bringing us back to through this joculation. If we are to represent this as a superlative of the present, then there's no reason why we can't escape the limits of that present. How do we puncture out of the sensibility without deferring to further sensibility? I say the fact that one remains sane becomes the new limit, right? If one does not embrace the moment with an irrationality and embrace a certain dimension of insanity into their lives, then they are denying what it means to actually be fully present in their moment. Okay, that's for another topic. This is still to critique Anton. And so let's see if there's any more commentary. For the most part, I think, oh, what I wanted to get to next was the idea of this. He makes an argument for dreamless sleep, right? Now, dreamless sleep is a subjective absenting or a falling out of the 0-1 joculation into an empty set joculation, right? It would be like bringing up a -0, where one uses one's lack of space, one's temporal jump, even though if scientists are watching an individual sleep, some scientists used to see the paradigm was that individuals always dream every time they go to sleep, and that this is evidenced through watching the alpha, gamma, delta patternings of neurofirings, and that upon the ecstatic reawakening into consciousness, the serotonin or dopamine reuptake causes forgetfulness, and that forgetfulness is substitutable for what the individual testimony of saying I didn't have a dream was, right? But as long as there was brain activity, it's said one way, materialistically, scientifically. Like, see, this is kind of the paradox also. If we say that they are always dreaming and that the subconscious or the subjective, the who am I question is answered communally through the science. See, it's funny that Anton will say evolution is true, but then when it comes to saying dreams are always the case and science proves it, he won't agree to that. At that point, he'll joculate to the subjective claim and make that be tantamount, and make that at that moment shift the question to what is happening in the materiality, and then what's the testimony of the individual who experiences an anesthesiological drop out of a temporal exiting, right? This exiting is what, religious people will still claim that as soon as neurofiring ends, the exiting or the absenting that would be claimed in dreamless sleep would have another joculation that would be that there would be a presencing of the soul, right? Like a disembodiment of the soul, which would bring us back to the human that was, at one time so outlined with such grandiose importance as to bring about histories of manifest destiny and conquering of nature, where the ego was its tightest or its most solidified. It's really pretty amazing. So anyway, I'm not certain what to say about that last part, but give me based on what it is I've said and what it is I've played, and I guess I'll link what it is I'm using in terms of his videos. Go ahead and give me some feedback as to how these re-indexings based on the superlative juxtapositions, and where when he's speaking of nothing being real, and he could rephrase that as to being something and no thing, and no thing, where no thing would be like two negatives making a positive, but no thing would be the use in his terminology. It would be bringing about or focusing upon the zero, and then his awe and reverence of the zero, right? As if the zero cannot be turned into a joculation between empty set and full empty set, right? And there's really nothing to be so incredibly odd about, I suppose. But anyway, what I'm getting at is, feel free to talk to me a little bit about what it is I'm speculating about Anton, in terms of feeling as if his ontological, cosmological descriptions are always ever leading either A, to the present, right, and that there's only this fissure or gap or thing that he's trying to import through a two-dimensionality that we call the moment, right? And then notice his joculations in other areas, in terms of age, or in terms of you don't know your own face, the outward and inwardness of elements. Tell me what it is I'm missing in this triptych or quadric joculation that seems to be utilized conveniently for Anton, right? But pushed aside when one wants to say, I want to utilize the nothing as nothing is real as a referent to that which is imaginary, which would justify a historic dynamic background in natural selection, as to suggest that the environment is to be rounded and considered separate from the organism, that the organism is able to actually be selected by the environment dynamically, so that we don't have the notion of survival of those who survive. Thanks. Toodaloo.